Well, welcome to the Janelle King Show. I'm Janelle King. This is Extra 106.3, and this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. So, today's kitchen table topic, what are we discussing? I'm calling it the money wars. Are we heading into a recession, or do we even know what's really going on? I was speaking to a dear friend of mine the other day, and she mentioned how the tariffs that President Trump was putting in place, she was debating how she felt like it was going to cause a recession or lead us into a worst case financial situation than we're already in. And I don't believe that she was too fond of them, and that was kind of her position, but mostly because she really felt as though these tariffs were going to fall back on everyone outside of the wealthy class, and that it was going to affect people that are not wealthy more so than those who are. And that was just kind of a big thing for her. And I personally felt like there's going to be, of course, some adjustments, and we just have to have faith in our market that it's going to regulate it. And that, yes, there may be some volatile times, but we've seen these times before. And sometimes it's necessary in order to move forward, to push pass and to be able to win. So, or in our case, get back on top. But what the conversation did was it sent me on a rabbit trail where I began to research these particular topics, and I realized that there's so many people that whenever these conversations start around finances, government financing, tariffs, and all these things, there are a lot of people that feel as though these conversations are going over their head because there's such a lack of understanding on how government finance works and what do we look at and what matters to people. So in this episode, we're going to hit as much information as possible regarding the money war and what's happening. We're going to hit topics such as the debate surrounding the federal budget, but depending on when this drops, we may have already passed it or we may be somewhere else, but it's important to know what's happening with the federal budget and why this keeps happening. What does it mean when we talk about a continued resolution? What are tariffs? What does the acronym GDP mean? And what does it have to do with all of this? Is a recession in our future? How does the market affect politics? And when I hear people talk about job numbers, what are they really saying? So I'm going to try to hit as much of these topics as I possibly can so that I can bring you into this money war discussion so you can be able to participate adequately. And then finally, at the end of the show, I'm going to share my take on some of these issues, as well as provide you with some helpful tips to help us weather the storm that may or may not be coming. But first, current events. So staying in the same vein of spending, and speaking of spending, DOGE, our Department of Government Efficiency, is cracking down on credit card spending. Apparently, thousands of government credit cards are set to be frozen, with civil servants required to reapply to justify their need for them. This is happening because data has shown that spending, particularly procurement cards or procurement spending, has increased in from $155 million in the 2020-2021 cycle to $675 million in the 2024 to 25 cycle. So we're talking about going from 155 million being spent a year to $675 million spent a year on procurement credit cards. These are federal employees. What are they all flying first class? What is going on? Anyway, the government plans to reduce the number of procurement cards by at least 50% and lower hospitality spending, which has already been limited from $2,500 to $500. I mean, why were we spending that much money? Anyway, criticism arose after it was revealed that taxpayers' money was spent on luxury items and experiences, highlighting a lack of scrutiny. So that's where all of our taxpayers' dollars were going. And this is why people don't have any patience and why they're a little bit annoyed with federal workers who complain about having to go into their jobs to work, but yet we're seeing things like this. So it's just not good. Anyway, along with cracking down on spending, he's also continuing with the cuts. Trump administration cuts have impacted or are set to impact the Food and Drug Administration by eliminating employees who review food safety and medical devices. Probationary employees at the FDA received job elimination notifications, as reported by 3 FDA staffers who spoke to the Associated Press anonymously. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services announced plans to fire 5,200 probationary employees across its agencies, including the FDA. But not everyone sees this move as efficient. Mitch Zeller, the former FDA director for tobacco, stated that the firings, he believes, are intended to demoralize and undermine the spirit of the federal workforce. Really? Really? Okay. All right, let's just keep going. Lastly, the White House stated that the Trump administration will not cut Social Security or Medicare following comments from presidential advisor Elon Musk about entitlement cuts. Well, here's what Elon actually said that's being misconstrued. His direct quote was that the waste and fraud in entitlement spending, which is most of the federal spending, is entitlements. So that's like the big one to eliminate. That's the sort of half trillion, maybe 600 or 700 billion a year. So basically, he wasn't saying we got to get rid of all entitlement spending, but he did say that that's a big area where we could cut some spending. So according to the Trump administration, they agree with Elon Musk. The U.S. Government Accountability Office estimates taxpayers lose as much as $521 billion annually to fraud. And most of that is within entitlement programs such as Medicare and Medicaid. Over the past 2 decades, the federal government has made an estimated $2.7 trillion in improper payments, the majority of which come from the majority of which come in the form of payments to deceased individuals or those who no longer are eligible for government programs. Let me just pause right here for a second and just add my little 2 cents. If you grew up in a community that's poor or very low income, you know somebody, or you've heard of someone, or it may have been you, which I hope not, but you at least know of someone who's still collecting benefits on a family member they may have passed away. It could have been a grandparent, and then you have a cousin who still couldn't get that check. And it's so fascinating because when you don't know, you don't know. And it appeared to be like, oh, this is money that is due to this family member. So even when they pass away, that money is now due to, or should now immediately go to the family, as if it's like a pension or something that was earned. Now, mind you, I know we all pay into these systems, right? But a lot of times people are just not understanding that is called stealing from the government, that it's fraud when you take someone else's check that's not cut to you or written out to you or supposed to be there for you. But I'm telling you, there is a huge confusion, a lot of confusion around this. And I do think that's I believe that should be part of what's happening. While we're cutting, while we're finding out where the fraud is, we need to be educating people on the law and the way it works and who they are to contact. Because instead of assuming that people are just going to do the right thing, all of this stuff needs to be further investigated, and education matters. We need to make sure we educate our populace. Okay. All right. Now, also, according to the administration, the Social Security Administration made an estimated $72 billion in improper payments between 2015 and 2022. The Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services estimated it made $140 plus billion of improper payments in 2024 alone. So as you can see, there is a need more than ever for all of us to understand government finance and government spending and how it is affecting us. I mean, how many times are we going to just allow our money to float away? So after the break, we're going to turn the kitchen table into a classroom desk, and we're going to dive into some of this finance stuff. And I'm going to try my best to explain these topics to you in layman's terms in the most simple way possible so that you can remember how all this works and you can participate in the conversation whenever it is going on. So much more after the break. You're listening to the Janelle King Show. This is Extra 106.3. We'll be right back.
Hello, everyone. My name is Suzanne Guy, and this is the Church's Moment. There is an incredible opportunity to start a distinct pro-life ministry at your church. We started one at our church about 5 years ago, and the fruit has been tangibly beautiful. We do monthly meetings that educate and equip the body of believers on sanctity of human life issues from womb to tomb by bringing in and featuring different pro-life leaders from all over Georgia, as well as featuring different ministries like post-abortion healing ministries or foster care ministries. There are so many great community partners out there. And then the second part of this pro-life ministry is having a care team. This is an opportunity to show moms in crisis, moms in unplanned, unwanted, or crisis pregnancies, that the church is the place to run to, that the church is a safe haven and a place to go for tangible help, real hope, true compassion, friendship, and discipleship, and yes, an opportunity to share the gospel in both word and deed. Brothers and sisters in Christ, will you consider starting a distinct pro-life ministry at your church? It's so easy. Please contact me today to find out how simple this is. You can contact me at my email, proverbs318@att.net. This is the Church's Moment.
Thank you so much for joining the show. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll be notified every time I upload new content. Now back to the discussion. Welcome back to the Janelle King Show. I'm Janelle King, and this is Extra 106.3. And this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And today's kitchen table topic is the money wars. Are we heading into a recession? And what is all this talk around government finances? Now, before the break, we hit a few current events, and I wanted to make sure that I dedicated the bulk of this segment towards educating you on some of what this money talk is all about. You know, these are the conversations that are happening around you and absolutely affect you. But unfortunately, when we hear these different terms like tariffs or GDP, we get a little nervous and sometimes confused because we feel like this is a subject that we need to stay out of because we may not be as equipped to have a conversation around government finances. And ultimately, it's simply because there's a lack of understanding. So I want to help you with that because we cannot be an informed populace, and we certainly cannot be a populace of people who are holding our leaders accountable if we're staying out of important conversations like finances and money. So let's just start with what is a recession and why are we talking about this right now? Well, we all know that we're in an inflationary period, which means that we are looking at high prices in the grocery stores, and things just seem to be very, very elevated and high. So, but recently, President Trump was interviewed, and during his interview, he was asked if a recession was in our future, and his response actually kind of sent the market plunging. Take a listen.
Look, I know that you inherited a mess, and you said that the
I've
other
only
night,
been here,
but
for
are you expecting a recession this year?
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition because what we're doing is very big. We're bringing wealth back to America. That's a big thing. And there are always periods of, it takes a little time. It takes a little time.
So as you can see, that comment, it absolutely sent the market plunging. And those who had money, they began to pull it out of the market. Let's sell, sell, sell. We have to understand, what do we mean when we say a recession. Like, what is a recession? Are we talking about breadlines? Are we talking about extreme unemployment? Sometimes it can get that bad, and it can be that bad. And quite frankly, it can get that bad at any point. So I want to simplify some of these economic concepts of just a little bit, keeping in mind that I'm not an economist. There's the great Thomas Sowell for that. There's the great Milton Friedman for all of that. I'm just a girl who wants to understand and want you to understand with me. So let's just start with some basics. What is a recession? A recession takes place when there's a significant decline in economic activity spread across the economy lasting more than a few months. This is why you are hearing more and more people blame tariffs as to whether or not why we're seeing some of the issues that we're seeing. Now, while they may be a contributing factor, it's just that it's one factor. So in other words, let's try to explain this to you differently. Imagine if you're going to a grocery store that usually has a line of busy shoppers waiting to check out. That would be an example of having a thriving economy with people spending money, and they're spending money freely. Now, picture a sudden situation. Maybe there's a winter storm, or there's something that happened where people are worried about getting stuck at home, like COVID, so to speak. The stores are still open, but the number of shoppers drastically decreases, leading to shorter lines at checkout. In this scenario, the grocery store represent the economy, and the recession is like that storm. It's a period where consumer confidence drops, leading to reduced spending. Just as the store struggles with the less cash coming in, businesses all across the economic face challenges with lower sales. So if you are a business now that's in this economy, you're now facing these challenges but of having lower sales, which can result in layoffs as well as a slowdown in growth as a whole as a business. In other words, when people hold back on spending, the entire system feels that impact. Just as that grocery store depends on that steady customer traffic in order to thrive, so so does the economy require economic activity to keep going so that it can thrive. So when the president sounds unsure about what's ahead, guess what we do? We stop spending money. We start saving a little bit more. We start cutting the non-essentials such as nail salons. We decide to start packing our lunch rather than going to a local restaurant to grab a bite to eat, etc., etc. Matter of fact, the number one sign that a recession is looming is a decrease in consumer spending, while also seeing a rise in unemployment, which is taking place due to some of these layoffs, but it's also taking place because if people are pulling back on their spending, then a lot of businesses are now going to have to try to figure out how they're going to still be able to maintain costs, because it still costs. Every time a business turns those lights on, there's a cost associated with that has to be covered. And it's typically covered through revenue, which is what the business makes as it relates to what providing a product or a service. So all this has to happen, and it all has to happen and together in order for it to all work appropriately. As a matter of fact, the number one sign, like I was stating, of a recession or a looming recession is when you do see that decrease in consumer spending, and you do see a rise in unemployment or a falling in our GDP, which is our gross domestic product, which I will discuss in a bit. So I completely understand where President Trump is coming from, and I appreciate his honesty in allowing us to be able to make certain decisions that's appropriate for us, knowing what could possibly be coming, and just not taking us as fools and trying to tell us something that's happening when it's really not. So there has to be a time of preparation. I believe that President Trump understands that, and that's what he's allowing us to do. So let's go back and talk about GDP really quickly. So what does it mean when we say a gross domestic product? So GDP, or gross domestic product, measures the total value of all goods and services produced in a country within a specific time frame. Because this is a bit harder to understand, I'm going to associate it with an analogy with each part of this understanding, so that you can see it and have a type of picture that can associate with it. So to understand GDP, or gross domestic product overall, you have to think of it like a report card. So let's just say the GDP is a report card of America, right? The School of America. And the report card summarizes a student's performance in various subjects, showing grades that reflect how they're doing overall. So in this analogy, the student represents the country's economy, and each subject, like math, science, and history, will represent different sectors of the economy, such as manufacturing, services, or agriculture. So if you have a high GPA, which indicates the student is excelling in their studies, just as having a rising GDP reflects a healthy, growing economy. So think about it like this. If I have a high GPA, which is reflecting how I'm doing in my studies, a GDP reflects how the economy is doing, whether it's healthy or it's growing, where various sectors and how various sectors are performing. Conversely, if the student gets a low grades and has low grades in several different subjects, that would indicate that they are struggling, and that would mean that their GPA would drop. Similar to the falling of our GDP, that signals economic challenges. So when listening to a discussion about GDP, you want the number to be high. So the overall purpose of a GDP is to get a snapshot, much like at the end of that potluck when you can see how well everyone threw out the total spread of the food that was provided. The more collaborative, the more diverse the dishes are, the better the overall meal was. Similarly, with GDP, it shows a various different methods of measuring economic output to provide a complete picture of the country's economic health. If there are fewer dishes or less variety of businesses and goods and services being provided, then it suggests that the community isn't as vibrant. Just like a declining GDP would indicate economic challenges, it helps us gauge the overall health of the economy and informs policy decisions. So a good GDP growth rate can vary based on the country's economic conditions and stage of development, but generally for developed countries like the United States, Germany, Japan, the GDP growth rate is around 2% or 3%, and that is considered to be healthy. This range indicates steady economic growth without overheating the economy, which can lead to inflation, which we're in right now because the economy got a little overstimulated. So some developing countries can experience higher growth rates where they've seen around like 7% or 8%, but that could be due to rapid industrialization or any type of significant investments that are being made in that country. So in summary, a good GDP range is typically between 2% and 3% for developed economies and 5 to 7% for emerging economies. Now, I hope that wasn't too confusing, but if we're going to be an educated voter, we have to understand government economics, and you got to understand how we're getting to these points and why this is happening. Other points you will hear when understanding the money war, it can be talks about, you maybe hear things about how the market affects politics. And this simply means that the stock market performance can influence political decisions and public perception of government effectiveness. So think of politicians as players in a game and the stock market as the crowd. So if the crowd, public opinion, is cheering, then that typically means that the market is up. And then politicians feel more confident. But if you're hearing booing, that typically means the market is down. And then they're typically faced with a lot of pressure. So policymaking is often balanced between economic needs and political pressures, heavily impacted by market performance. Something else that you will likely hear about as you are educating yourself on the economics and government finances are job numbers. So job numbers reflect the employment statistics, including unemployment rates and job creation or loss over a period of time. It's like a sports team tracking player performance. So job numbers help businesses and the government understand the health of the job market. Strong job numbers often indicate a robust economy, while weak numbers, it can be a signal of economic trouble or turmoil coming. All right, moving on. Let's talk about tariffs. So tariffs are essentially, tariffs are taxes placed on imported goods to protect domestic businesses and generate government revenue. So how does this all work? So imagine you're at a neighborhood bake sale where everyone in the community brings their homemade treats to sell. Each neighbor has different specialties. Some bake cookies, some bake pies, some create delicious cakes, but they all do something uniquely different, but we all represent this neighborhood. Now, let's just say there's a new family that moves in nearby and starts selling their desserts at a much lower price. Now, to protect the local bakers, and encourage everyone to buy from or within their local neighborhood versus going to this other location that's now popped up outside of the neighborhood. Let's say the baker has the bake sale organizer. So this is the person that's now in control of who gets to buy and sell, well, mostly who gets to sell at this bake sale. So I'm the organizer. So let's say I'm the organizer and I decide that I want to impose now a neighborhood fee on any outside baked goods sold at the event. This fee now increases the cost that the new family has on their treats, because now they have to cover that new charge, that new cost, making it more expensive for them compared to going to the local neighborhood baked goods. In this analogy, the bake sale represents the economy, and the local bakers symbolize domestic businesses or American businesses competing in the market. And then the new family that's selling treats outside of the neighborhood represents foreign companies offering imported goods. The neighborhood fee that is now imposed on the outside company is akin to a tariff. Just as the fee makes outside desserts less attractive to buyers, tariffs are taxes on imported goods that raise their prices and aim to encourage consumers to buy domestic products. Now, while this does help local businesses, it can also result in some higher prices for all consumers. Similar to the bake sale, it may end up costing more if they buy locally because of this neighborhood fee, but it all ultimately benefits those local businesses. So you can't get mad at the bake sale organizer for deciding that this would be better for those local businesses, because in this analogy, her role is to protect the businesses on the street, much like our federal government. Its responsibility is to ensure that I am not burdened as a business owner. So to be clear, we are in a tariff war. Trump is not fighting by himself. Every country sees a transition of power as an opportunity to negotiate. And to be quite frank, I am interested in seeing what he can do. Now, so far, President Trump has imposed a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports from all countries, reinstating duties that have been waived or exempt. And recently, Trump threatened to impose a 200% tariff on European wine and alcohol in the EU if they proceed with a 50% tariff on American whiskey, as reported. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen defended the EU's countermeasures, stating the need to protect consumers and businesses. So as you can see, the bake sale organizer isn't the only one protecting her side of the street. It's all countries. And it looks crazy when I see Americans who are fighting our president over placing a high tariff on another country. So yes, they can raise prices for consumers and lead to trade disputes, but also it can help local markets survive against foreign competition. So now let's talk about what is happening in Congress right now, the budget fights. So to fund or not to fund? That is the question. There is a fight happening amongst Republicans, but first, let's understand the budget fight as a whole. So, the federal budget is a financial plan proposed by the government that outlines expected revenue from taxes and other sources and planned spending on various programs, services, and departments for the upcoming fiscal year, which runs from October 1st through September 30th. The budget serves as several the budget serves several key purposes. Allocating resources, it determines how much money is allocated to various sectors such as defense, education, healthcare, infrastructure, and social services. It also reflects the government's priorities and policy choices, indicating which programs will receive funding and which will be cut or reduced. The budget can help influence the economy, managing inflation, unemployment, and overall economic growth through appropriate spending and tax policies. So you can imagine why there is a constant fight over the passing of the budget, because it often involves intense political discussions and disagreements, typically along party lines. You have different political parties having various different priorities and beliefs about how the government money should be spent. Tool Thus, lawmakers may attempt to use the budget as a leveraging tool through additional policy measures or reforms, leading to additional conflicts. And with many stakeholders involved, from individual lawmakers to the president to public opinion and all kinds of stuff, reaching a consensus can be extremely challenging. Compromises are often made, and it leads to these lengthy debates and revisions. But they don't have all day. The government shutdown occurs when Congress fails to pass the budget or a continued resolution, which is a temporary funding measure, by the deadline. And as a result, many federal agencies stop operating. That's what a federal shutdown is. It's when the agencies stop operating and non essential services are halted. That can lead to federal employees being placed on unpaid leave until the budget is resolved, resulting in a loss of income for them. Although I do believe that they do get that money back. I believe that it is paid back to them once the government reopens. But government shutdowns can also impact the economy, affecting consumer confidence and spending, and potentially delaying contracts and projects. So now that you have an overview of the picture, an overview or a picture of what's happening, why are Republicans fighting today? Here's why. Because oftentimes the budget is filled with what politicians, or what we like to call, pork or fat, right? It's just a bunch of unnecessary spending, and many of us, as particularly as Republicans, are just tired of it. We're just tired of all the unnecessary spending. As I ran down earlier in the show, there's clearly a lot of unnecessary spending happening right now. And the last time the United States government passed a balanced budget was in the late 1990s. Specifically, the federal budget was balanced for 4 consecutive years, from 1998 to 2001. And during this period, the United States experienced budget surpluses, which means that the government collected more money in revenue than it spent. And that was during 1998 to 2001. The fiscal year ended with a surplus of approximately $69 billion in 2000 and $128 billion in 2001. Since then, the annual budget deficits have become more common, primarily due to an increase in government spending and various economic factors. So, the issue of achieving a balanced budget has since remained a topic of considerable debate, much like today. Because we were facing a government shutdown in December of 2024, Congress reached a deal to avert the government shutdown by issuing a continuing resolution, or for short, they call it a CR, which is a temporary funding measure that allows the government to continue operating when a new budget hasn't been passed. It's like knowing you hate the gym, but you can't end your subscription until another month. So you have to renew with the old subscription until the next month can come, and then you can decide on a new plan because you haven't made up your mind yet. So you just renew because you're still trying to decide what you want to do, what you want your new plan to be. And in this case, it's kicking the problem down the road, preventing the government shutdown, but ensuring that essential services remain available, even though the budget is still an ongoing debate. Well, this was a problem, particularly for Representative Thomas Massie and Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. And here's why. Many of them held their nose and they felt like they were passing a continuing resolution in December because they were waiting on this new administration to come into effect. This will allow them time to rework the budget and then they could pass something they would be proud of. Well, the agreement came, it included funding various government programs, and certain concessions were made in order to get bipartisan support. Now it's time to pass the budget again. So now this back up because remember, we kicked it down the road. However, President Trump is supporting kicking the can down the road again, or at least a little bit more, stating that he needs more time to make America great again and is not happy with Representative Massie, who is beloved by Republicans. You know, President Trump is calling for Representative Massie to be voted out after Massie announced that he would oppose the continuing resolution. Massie claimed that Democrats have offered enough votes to pass the resolution despite Trump's criticism. Trump labeled Massie as a grandstander and vowed to lead the effort against him. Massie has previously faced challengers, but stated his constituents value transparency and principles over loyalty. Look, I'm personally on Massey's side when it comes to this. You know, he's been attacked several times, but he maintains his seat. And people understand that because he's someone who's principled and they believe in that. And they know that he believes in what he's saying. And he believes that we need to stop all this spending and that lawmakers need to do their job. I agree. Doge found USAID to be a huge money pit, yet passing a continued resolution would fully fund the USAID as before, and it just doesn't make sense. And I'm really over this whole threatening of taking seats if you don't do what I tell you to do. Now, not if you are listening to your constituents, but it just so happens that your constituents want something that I don't want. But if you don't do what I tell you to do, that's a little annoying to me. And I'm so sorry, but Trump does not get to decide who represents Massey's constituents. And when I see these type of threats, my initial thought is that Trump doesn't care about what the people want because it doesn't fit what's happening or what he would like in with his narrative. And we got to be careful with that. Because whether that is the plan or not, that's certainly how it comes off. The House bill is estimated to add $4 trillion in debt over the next 10 years, according to the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget. So what are we doing? We can't be down for major changes on one hand and then we fight it on the other. Discourse is necessary. And I really just want Congress to place the same amount of energy that they have while they're negotiating. And I want them to point that towards coming up with solutions to get us back in a place where we can pass a balanced budget. All right. Now, I want you to pat yourself on the back because you made it through that economic lesson. I hope you feel better. I hope you feel a little more equipped to participate in these economic conversations because they're happening and they're happening around us. After the break, are we heading into a recession? Is now the time to pull all this information and pull it together and put it to work? So don't leave the table just yet. You're listening to the Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3. We'll be right back. Thank you so much for joining the show. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll be notified every time I upload new content. Now back to the discussion. This is the Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3, where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And if you're joining us for the first time, don't worry. You can catch an encore episode tomorrow at 9 a.m. right here on Extra 106.3. And remember, our podcast drops every Tuesday wherever you get your podcast. And if you're feeling eager, you can watch the video podcast right now on YouTube. Just remember to subscribe to our YouTube and Rumble pages, and your likes, comments, and shares are always welcomed. Now grab a seat and let's get back to the table. That's right. This is the Janelle King Show, and this is Extra 106.3. And as you heard, we discuss kitchen table topics here that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And today's kitchen table topic, money wars. Are we heading into a recession? So are we heading into a recession? You know, President Trump doesn't rule it out, and our Commerce Secretary says that everything is great. We have nothing to worry about. But here's what I think. When taking all that we discussed in the last segment into consideration, I think that we are already in a recession. I think that it will get a little bit worse before it gets better. We have a lot of federal layoffs. In a few months, they're going to need to get a job, even those that accepted the deal. That only lasts for a few months. I mean, I can see it in our industry of work because we're hiring, and it's way easier today to find quality candidates than it was in 2017 when the market was amazing. And that's because businesses and companies are laying off now due to consumer spending dropping. Back then, it was so high and people were spending and everybody was working, and now there was so much happening that there was very few people that was looking for jobs or looking for new employment. So having more people unemployed, plus consumers spending less and people deciding to save more, businesses closing is inevitable. And all of this together will absolutely trigger a recession, particularly if we keep this going. So now that we have a more detailed understanding of our money war and economics in general, we must understand cause and effect and who is to blame. And this is the fault of the Biden administration and all of the ridiculous spending they use towards social engineering the public and trying to control election outcomes. And unfortunately, when the fun parent screws things up, the disciplinarian parent has to clean it up. And then oftentimes they're seen as being mean or all these other things. But the truth of the matter is they're just doing the right thing. So as for us, I think the best thing we can do right now is we need to save a little bit more. We need to support local small businesses that are around you. Overall, consider buying local and supporting American businesses. Remember, we have to look out for our side of the street. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you have to go back and listen to our analogy about the bake sale. We also need complete strategies and not experiments. You know, I feel like, once again, we're back looking at welfare programs and entitlements, which was an experiment that didn't go away. The Department of Education was another experiment that didn't go away. So let's make decisions that not only add, but also remove when it's no longer necessary. So if we're going to have a strategy we're going to put in place, let's look at strategies that are not working or haven't worked, and let's look at moving them. And let's keep an eye on midterms while we're doing all of this, because states must remain strong in order to carry out this plan to make America great again. And getting slaughtered in the midterms and placing states under Democrat control will absolutely derail his plans. So let's be smart. Let's be well thought out, and let's be fully in control, because the independent voter who voted for Trump was most likely voting for him because they were concerned about the economy and they were concerned about the border. Both of them have to be addressed in order to maintain their support. If you listen to the entire show, I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. Please remember, education is powerful. Get educated, get in the game, get in the conversation. And until next week, stay unafraid, stay unapologetic, and never stop seeking the truth.